Hi, I'm Janice Jasinski from the Gateway to College National Network, and we have created a short training module on financial reporting of your Gateway to College program. We've updated the reporting form in a way that we hope will provide both you and the National Network more clarity about your program finances. In the next 20 minutes, we'll cover an overview of the GTC Program Financial Report and then do a deep dive into the new Excel file that the National Network is requesting for you to complete. This presentation is intended to help you identify all revenue sources, direct expenses, and in-kind investments associated with your Gateway to College program for the past academic year, including some that were not clearly identified in the previous financial report forms and some that might not be so obvious. Many of you will remember receiving a request like this one last year. The Gateway National Network sends it to each director around this time of year. This year, we're asking you to provide your financial report for the academic year 2013 through 2014. This report is important and can be very helpful. It provides a complete financial picture of the previous academic year, and it helps you to identify revenues or costs that might be less obvious but still influence how your stakeholders view the program. This allows you to consider the full impact and implications of your program on those stakeholders. The report also enables you to clearly identify the variables that have the greatest impact on your program's bottom line. You can also use the comprehensive information about your program's finances to advocate for the resources and support that will help you better serve your students. Finally, you and the National Network can use the data to show our funders and other stakeholders how their investments are being leveraged for even greater impact. The Gateway National Network intends to provide additional financial and stakeholder relations support over the next year to help programs improve their sustainability and build stronger stakeholder networks. We've updated the template this year to provide a more comprehensive and thorough look at your financial picture. Let's now shift to the Excel file to review the tool. This is the new 2014 Gateway to College Partner Financial Reporting file. It's organized into 4 tabs you'll see along the bottom of the spreadsheet. First is the Instruction tab. Here you will find detailed instructions to complete the 2014 fiscal report. It also has contact information if you have a question about the spreadsheet or the information that is requested. We'll come back to this tab shortly to explore it in more detail. The next tab is called Other Info. This is the first tab that you will have to complete with the information for your program. All yellow highlighted areas should be completed. This tab conveys your arrangements or structure for your K-12 funding with the school district and your tuition expenses with the college. Instructions and an example are included in this worksheet tab. The third tab is the 2014 fiscal report itself. This is the tab where you will record all of the relevant expenses and revenues associated with your program for the past academic year. Once again, your input is required in the yellow cells. The green cells should be used for comments and explanations. As previously mentioned, this report seeks to provide a comprehensive view of your financial situation, so you may see it through the eyes of your stakeholders. The format is fairly similar to the previous version, but we've adjusted the various revenue and expense categories to be fully inclusive, and we have added some graphical analytics at the bottom to enable you to visually understand and communicate your financials. More on this tab soon. And then the fourth is an example report. Here we've added some data and comments to provide a guide while you're completing the report. All right, let's get into more detail. We'll start with the Other Info tab. As mentioned, all yellow highlighted cells should be completed. This tab seeks to understand the basic financial relationships with the major stakeholders. Here you will provide details regarding your K-12 revenue, based on the MOU you have with the school district or districts. You can indicate the amount per student and then use the comment in cell C11 to describe the frequency. For example, is it $25 per daily attendance or $4,000 per year? Likewise, lines 13 and 14 collect further information on how students are counted. For example, is it based on average daily attendance, FTE, or an attendance head count on a specific date? And also how frequently your Gateway program or the college is paid for the K through 12 funds. The next two lines, lines 15 and 16, refer to the tuition arrangement between the Gateway program and the college. This can vary greatly across Gateway programs. Some colleges cover some or all of the tuition costs as in kind, where the college does not expect Gateway to fund those dollars. Other colleges bill the Gateway program at full or a discounted tuition. A few programs buy entire sections of college courses and pay directly for the sections versus at a tuition rate. Whatever the approach, please describe it in these two areas. Finally, please provide the contact information of the person completing this report, just in case the national network has any follow-up questions. Okay, let's move on to the 2014 Fiscal Report tab. Here we can get an overview of the report structure before we move on to the detailed instructions and definitions that will be available in the Instructions tab. Like the previous tab, yellow highlighted areas should be completed, and just fill in 0 if you do not have that type of revenue or expense. Dark gray are calculated cells, and you should never change the content there. Shaded cells are not applicable, and light green highlights are used for your comments or additional explanations. Note that throughout this training and the Excel file, you may see the abbreviation CC, meaning community college or college, and SD, meaning the school district or districts. The training is assuming that the college is hosting the program. Okay, so this report is divided into revenues, which are lines 10 through 17, and they show the potential sources of revenue, and expenses in lines 21 through 42, which are detailing the types of expenses. Additionally, the report is separating the expense categories further into an important distinction being direct, which is column C, and then in-kind expenses, which are column D. Direct, column C, refers to expenses that are clearly attributable or directly billed to the Gateway program and which must be covered by the Gateway program revenues. In general, these direct expenses are incremental to the college, meaning that if the Gateway program were to close, these expenses would not be incurred by the college. Often, these expenses will be visible on a program's expense report, those reports which may be available monthly or quarterly to you. Revenues are not as likely to be visible on the expense reports, and you may need to talk to the college finance or administration team to gain visibility to enable the reporting of the different revenue sources. The in-kind revenues and costs in column D refer to all the expenses which are not directly charged to the program, but support or enable the Gateway students and the program itself, and for which the college or the school district does not expect compensation. For example, most college hosts provide the facilities and the administrative and finance department support for the Gateway to College program at no charge. If the Gateway program were to close, these overhead costs would remain as they support the larger institution. Costs that are specifically attributable to the Gateway program, like the director or resource specialist salaries or staff that's hired to teach foundation courses, they should never be recorded as in-kind. In-kind costs are generally not visible to the director on their standardized expense reports, but finance or an administrator at the college may provide a rate or a dollar figure which will estimate that benefit to the program. And note that these definitions I just covered for direct and in-kind are documented, and you'll find them when we get to the Instructions tab. Okay, if we look down this report, line 44 provides a program balance, which essentially measures whether the current year revenues are covering the current year program expenses. If the number is positive, so revenues exceed expenses, that amount is available to the college host to cover the in-kind expenses that the college provides to the program. If the number's negative, that means the college has to cover some of the direct expenses of the program beyond the amount that they may already be funding as in-kind. Note that every program will have some positive or negative program balance. That really gives you an indication of whether or not you have a cushion or you need to look at closing a gap. Note that the purpose of this reporting is to enable Gateway directors to fully understand the financials associated with their program. The National Network, again, will provide some further training to assist our directors in managing their financial situation, as well as communicating benefits and results to stakeholders to further strengthen those relationships. Finally, at the bottom of this tab, there's a summary section and a graphic which will help you visually understand and communicate your financial results. The graph will automatically populate as you complete your template. We'll see an example of this in the final tab. All right, let's move to the Detailed Instructions tab. Here you will find detailed definitions for each line item. At the top of the tab, you'll find a brief summary of why this information is so important and how the information can be used by yourselves as well as the National Network staff. Lines 14 through 37 provide detailed descriptions for each revenue and expense line item that we just saw on the 2014 Fiscal Report tab. And note on this tab that column C describes the direct expenses and revenues, while column E describes the in-kind. Keep in mind that the purpose of this report is for you to develop a robust view of all revenues and expenses associated with your program for the just completed school year. If you have a revenue or expense but do not see it described in any of the definitions, use the other categories and then describe it in the green highlighted comment section. All right, let's work our way through these instructions, starting with revenue. K through 12. Enter the K through 12 funds associated with the recently completed academic year 13-14. Account for the K through 12 income on an accrual basis. This means the amount billed in the reporting period, not the amount received. It is possible that your program has not yet received all payments yet, but the billings will have occurred. The next two potential sources of revenue are Gateway National Network grants and Sift payments. These reflect the amount of grant funds or Sift payments, in the case of a Sift partner, that the National Network has provided to you in the school year. These funds may be associated with the startup of your program or with a supplemental project. If you receive grant funds or Sift payments from the National Network, the amount will be provided in your report. Otherwise, just enter 0. State or local government funding. Some states subsidize or provide funding to community colleges, generally based on college credit hours billed. This may or may not be collected at your college for Gateway students. If this is applicable in your situation, this funding is likely not visible to you as the director. We recommend that you investigate this, as it may be an additional source of revenue to the community college, which would help to support the Gateway cost structure and offset any costs incurred by the college. The national network has become aware that some colleges are able to collect this funding based on the Gateway student enrollment in college courses. Therefore, we've added this to the report as a potential source of revenue. Other grants and funding. Grants from local or national foundations, lottery, or other non-college funding should be entered here. Please be sure to provide a brief description of the source of funds in the green highlighted comment field on the 2014 Fiscal Report tab. Excuse me. In-kind income. This cell will automatically calculate based on the sum of all in-kind expenses and represents the college and/or the school district contribution to the program for which they do not require compensation. All right, next we'll move on to expenses. As you can see, the definitions for direct and in-kind are documented here in the red text. Remember, align your program expenses to the correct line items, meaning personnel, foundation class instruction, books, etc., as best as possible. Some programs may find that all in-kind costs are lumped together. That's fine. Just choose an appropriate line and then just note it in the comments section. What's important is that all expenses are identified and listed somewhere. Personnel. Direct personnel expenses would be the wages and benefits for those folks who are hired by the program, including the director, resource specialist, tutors, an administrative assistant, etc. It may include foundation class instructors, depending on how the Gateway program is structured. In-kind personnel could include personnel costs for the community college or host that include functions such as administration, management, finance department, HR, payroll, etc. Generally, the college host will provide these supporting services free of charge or in kind. If your college does directly charge the Gateway program for this type of expense, include those costs in direct overhead in cell 36 on the actual report. Like other overhead costs, this may not show up in your Gateway to College expense report, but most colleges will be able to provide you a rate that you can use to estimate this cost. Foundation class instruction. There is significant variety as to how Gateway programs structure and report the foundation class costs. Some programs hire instructors, and therefore they may count as direct personnel. Other programs contract for their faculty, paying by the credit hour or class, while others may utilize existing college classes. Some do a combination of the above. What's important is that the costs for the foundation class instructors show up somewhere in your expenses. Please use the green highlighted comment area to note where you're placing these expenses. Tuition and fees. Tuition and fees are for Gateway students enrolled in college credit courses. Some colleges bill their Gateway programs and require the Gateway program revenues to cover these costs. If that's the case, they're classified as direct expenses, while others do not charge tuition to the programs, and thus the tuition is classified as an in-kind expense. There are even some colleges that charge a reduced rate, where that reduced rate is direct, and then the amount of the discount could show up as in-kind, and that represents the college's contribution to the program. Books, travel, other student costs, those expenses are fairly straightforward in their description, and use the green highlighted field to provide further detail. Operating expenses. Expenses such as office supplies, printing, equipment, software, external consultants, Gateway National Network fees, etc., that are directly charged or associated with the Gateway program go here. We've collapsed several smaller categories of expense into this one line item. It covers all the operating costs of the program. If you have major expenditures, like a replacement of all computers, you might want to detail those in the green highlight to help you keep track of those major year-to-year changes. The next line is overhead, and it's used for expenses associated with the college overhead costs, such as facilities, management, finance, administration. Sometimes this is called indirect costs. Usually, these expenses are covered as in-kind, but there may be instances where a college is expecting the program to fund these costs, and therefore they're considered direct. The college finance team can provide an estimated cost, which is often expressed as a rate on a driver, such as the number of students or personnel costs. For example, a college may say to utilize 10% of your Gateway direct personnel cost as an estimate for overhead, or $25 per student, and that would cover estimated overhead costs. Some colleges may split this rate between in-kind personnel and in-kind overhead, where the overhead might only be the facilities costs. Completing the information above will calculate a program balance. As mentioned previously, the program balance lets you know how well your current year revenues cover your current year expenses and gives you an indication of how your stakeholders may view this. Carry forward from the prior year. Non-Sift programs that are receiving replication grants to start up their programs may have unspent funds from the prior school year that were actually available to spend in the school year being reported. For example, a grant that might have been awarded in academic year 2013, but the $25,000 is unspent in the school year ending 2013. It can then be applied to your program balance from the 2013-14 school year. And then the last thing to input is student enrollment. You can get this information from the Gateway to College student database. At the bottom of the instructions, you'll see email information where you can direct any questions regarding the report, and it's a guide on the email to use when you're submitting the report. Wow, well, we've covered a lot of information. We're almost through, but let's take a quick look at the Example Report tab. Here, sample data has been input for the GTC sample school. You can also see the types of comments that are included to the right. Remember, this report is for you to gain a clearer understanding of your financial situation. It will help you to plan your actions and financial structure for the future. Adding comments will help you remember what is included, where you sourced your information, etc. As you go to the bottom of this tab, you can see that in this sample, the program shows a negative $12,000 program balance. This means that the current year spending was slightly higher than the current year revenues. But given the size of this program, it's actually very close to break even. The graph, which is slightly below, will help you to see clearly both the source of revenues and the source of expenses in a view that helps you see which are your largest components and helps you to track how these two important categories relate to each other. Okay, that concludes our training on the 2014 Gateway to College Partner Financial Reporting. If you have any questions, please contact Emily Rico. Thank you so much for participating.